What's up, everyone? It's Woody. We are here again at Turbo Time, and today we're actually getting prepped for LSPR, which RalyGrl is going to be running in about a week and a half from today. But this week we're going to be posting the STPR prep video. So when you see this, it'll be the week after that if everything goes according to plan. We've got some good stuff going on today. If you are aware of the STPR failure that happened with the wheel bearing, today we're going through and getting the right parts back onto the car. So we got a new knuckle that we're throwing in there so that we can start getting it prepped to get the original setup back on there, since we had to kind of downgrade to something that would get us through the race. So what we worked on today is first wash down the car, because there was a whole lot of mud and silt that was in the courses. Is built up on the undercarriage. A lot of that was a little bit stubborn, so I actually took a wipe down on the car. Didn't use 2-bucket method or anything, because obviously we're not worried about this being a show car, but I definitely wanted to get some of that stuck on filth kind of removed so that it looks good. Once we got that done, we went ahead and rolled it in, started pulling off the wheels, pulling off the old knuckle, got everything broken loose. Thankfully, the guys over at All Wheels Driven used some grease on there. I'll try to put down in the description what they used, because I can't recall what it was. But that stuff was incredibly awesome. When we went to pull everything apart, it just came apart like butter. Obviously, the torque was there to hold it tight, but once we broke through that torque, everything just came straight out clean. And we're definitely going to be investing in some of that later, because it was incredible. Everything's back together with the knuckle. We're still waiting on a caliper, so Ryan at Turbo Time is going to go ahead and clean that up and get everything put back together once those parts arrive. And apparently those 2-pot, 4-pot calipers are getting extremely rare, so it's been hard to get a hold of those. We found one, I believe he said, through the company we were using previously for the driver's side, and we weren't able to get one from the passenger side to replace. So he's currently working on a deal to see if we can get a few more of those on backup, since they are getting harder and harder to get a hold of. That's kind of in a nutshell what we did today. One big piece of news that you'll see towards the end of the video is RalyGrl just got a new partnership with Killer B, and they sent her a catch can that looks incredible, and we're getting that mounted up today. We got that mounted up, and you'll see that again at the end of the video. And the only thing left is to kind of get some of the positive crankcase ventilation and all the hosing ran, so that we actually get some suction from the top to pull the oil out of the engine and get everything into that catch can. So we've got it mounted, we've got it placed, the hood closes, clears, everything is good on that. It's an incredibly looking piece, and if you've been following RalyGrl on Instagram, you see she's gotten some other good toys and goodies from Killer B. So we're really excited to have them on board with us as well. It's going to be great having them as a partner. So let's go ahead. I'm going to kick off the video, show you some of the cleanup, and just kind of show what we did as we went through. It's my first time actually tearing apart a knuckle one-on-one, me and Ryan, so I learned a lot of good stuff, and I'll try to pass some of that on to you. So stay tuned. More mud came off with each step of cleaning. It was incredible how stuck on this mud was. This is my first muddy event with RalyGrl, and most times a pressure wash is all it takes to get stitch clean, but even with all of the time spent, I just kept finding more and more mud. It was absolutely insane.
even after all the time we spent, you could still see the mud pouring out as we got closer to finishing on cleaning up the rear to do the brake work. The next step after cleaning up the car was to clean up our replacement knuckle and do some prep work before getting it put on stitch and getting everything connected. This included releasing the bottom half of the drum brake setup that resides inside of the rotor so that we could release the old emergency brake cable to make room for the cable that Stitch already had installed. Once the cable was out, we put everything back together so we wouldn't lose any parts while putting the knuckle back on the car. And after that was done, we started removing the old knuckle, beginning with the 2 bolts that hold the caliper in place. Make sure you hang the caliper in a way that doesn't strain the brake line, and I explained that more in the STPR prep video from last week. We won't be reusing the calipers or rotors since we're going to be putting the upgraded parts back on the car when this all goes back together. On the passenger side, all we need to do is pull the caliper and rotor so we can put on the new parts when they're ready. Quick blowdown to get any loose dirt off, then we can lubricate the bolts and get them ready for removal. Everything is out of the way, we're going to do a quick cleanup to make sure there's no dirt in any of our mounting points or parts. Ready to mount our new knuckle and start hooking everything up. The dust shield will need to be cut off later to make room for the larger rotor and caliper that we're going to be fitting. We'll need to temporarily mount the knuckle so that we can use a slide hammer to remove the existing hub in order to install the new one. Hub off, we move on to putting in some fresh wheel bearings. We remove the circlip to give us access to remove the old ones first. We're using a bearing, race, and seal removal kit to change out the bearings. If you don't have access to one of these tool sets, check out your local hardware store rental program. It will definitely be worth it as it makes a job like this so much easier. And I should mention that this is not the only method for wheel bearing replacement, so be sure to verify how your vehicle is set up before jumping into a job like this. The first step is to pull out the old bearings through the hub assembly by the bearing race. And now with the old bearings out, the hub assembly should be ready for your new bearing set. Next, we set up the tool to press the new bearings into place. Once the bearings are seated at the proper depth, install the circlip back in place to hold the race where it belongs. Be sure the circlip is firmly seated all the way around. After the circlip is in place, if there is a plastic sleeve in the middle of the bearing assembly, carefully remove it, being cautious not to pull any of the bearing parts out with it. Next, we install the external bearing seal with the flat side out. To do this, I put the seal in place as evenly as possible and continuously tapped the highest edge very lightly until it was flush with the external edge of the hub assembly. Then we can insert the hub. At this point, we partially tore the drum brakes apart again to reinstall the emergency brake cable. This probably would have been easier to manage before doing the wheel bearings, but at this point it was a little too late to figure that out. Ryan showed me a trick to install the inner wheel bearing seals by placing them carefully on the axle as they would sit when inside of the hub assembly. If you use this trick, be very careful that the seals don't move when installing the axle into the hub assembly. Once the axle is in place, but before fully setting it, reinstall the bolts that secure the knuckle. These don't have to be tightened yet, but they should be in their proper place. And once everything's in place, we put the spindle nut onto the axle by hand. Screwing this on most of the way by hand will help to avoid any cross-threading issues. And after that was done, we tightened all of the bolts for the knuckle, then came back to the spindle nut and tightened it to the proper torque spec. If you don't know your torque specs, you should be able to find them in your factory service manual or online. Lastly, we notched the spindle nut into the gap on the axle to lock it into place. Then our last task of the night was to get RalyGrl's new Killer B Motorsport air oil separator and catch can installed. To start, Ryan located the two existing bolt holes on the passenger side strut tower where we would be mounting the kit. He picked out the Bug-Eye WRX kit because of the similarities between the two chassis engine bays, specifically the strut towers, where the kits are typically installed. Once we determined the installation point, we cleaned all around the area with some brake cleaner, then he cleaned out the threads prior to the installation. Once the installation area was clean, Ryan installed the mounting bracket using the included stainless hardware.
I do like the stainless bolts and stainless bracket, that's very nice.
Once the bracket was installed, we attached the catch can and air oil separator to the bracket, and that was it for the hardware portion of the installation. The next step will be routing all the lines, but he planned to do that the following day. Check out the selection of air oil separators available from KillerBMotorsport.net. The kits come with the separator, the hoses, stainless mounting brackets, and hardware. The catch can be purchased separately to add on to the air oil separator and has an easy open drain valve. The build quality of the kit looks great, and Ryan was impressed by the materials and build quality used in the kit, as well as the design for how the separator works. So if you're in the market for Subaru upgrade parts, be sure to check them out at KillerBMotorsport.net. At this point it was getting pretty late, so we verified hood clearance on the separator and called it a night. And by the time you see this video, the Killer B catch can install would have been completed, the calipers and rotors have arrived and been installed, brakes have been bled, and RalyGrl is preparing for her race at Lake Superior Performance Rally, or LSPR for short. Some things came up last minute, and I won't be able to make it out to LSPR, so there will not be an LSPR recap video. So be sure to follow RalyGrl on Instagram to get the latest updates during the race, and download the ARA Rally app if you want to keep track of her progress. That's all I've got for today, but as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, stay tuned, and I hope you have a great day.